Have you ever looked up into the night sky and have wondered what is really up there? Maybe it's hard to see the stars where you live, but beyond our Earth, there are some cool pieces of technology that scientists have sent up into space that are collecting information, but also helping us here on Earth. This technology is so important. In fact, we rely on a lot of those things that are floating up around in space more than we know. There are people who research, work together, and build projects to make sure all of this technology is working the way that it should. Who would do this for their job? Find out what STEM career I am describing in this episode of the STEM Career Quest. Have you ever found yourself asking this question, what do I want to be when I grow up? Maybe you already have an answer to that. Maybe you don't. Both are okay. Welcome to the STEM Career Quest podcast, a show made for kids like you to help you build your dreams or even find new ones in science, technology, engineering, and math. Each week, hear captivating stories and interviews to explore the exciting world of STEM. Oh, and grown-ups and teachers, you can listen too. We'll talk to experts in STEM who are passionate about what they do in the real world and how they make a positive impact in their careers. Created and hosted by K-5 STEM coach Naomi Meredith, this show will spark your imagination and passions. Join us each week on our quest to explore the possibilities of careers in STEM, one episode at a time. The STEM career we are going to be hearing about today is what it is like being a systems engineer manager. In this career, they lead a team of engineers and technical advisors to advise on how to operate the machinery for a project. Our guest works with the military and with a team of military members, and they work on the operations and controls for strategic military satellite communications. To tell us all about it, we will be meeting our special guest, Joseph Reynolds-Grant. As a child, Joseph was a Cub Scout and later became an Eagle Scout. He had a lifelong dream of being able to fly in the sky. He eventually attended the Air Force Academy and had a cool career in the military, which you are going to be hearing all about. His current role isn't directly in the military, like I mentioned before, but he does get to work with the military. What might surprise you is how much STEM is involved with the work in the military, and Joseph will tell you all about it. So excited for you to get to know Joseph and his awesome STEM career. Now, get ready for today's episode quest, my lovely questies. As you listen to today's episode, find out the answers to these 3 questions. At the end of the episode, I will be revealing the answers. Question number 1 is, which branch of the U.S. military is Joseph and his team working with? Question number 2, how do satellites get up into space? And question number 3, true or false? Based on Joseph's experience, he thinks that a lot of the things that we see in science fiction are going to be science reality one day. Be a careful listener. Now let's go embark on today's STEM career quest. Well, thank you, Joseph, so much for being here on our show. We're so excited to have you. And if you wouldn't mind telling us, what is your STEM career and how would you describe what you do?
Okay, so my STEM career is I am a systems engineering manager. I work on a military base in Colorado Springs, and that base is called Schriever. It used to be Schriever Air Force Base, but it's now Schriever Space Force Base. And I lead a team of engineers and technical advisors that advise military members on how to operate and control strategic military satellite communications satellites.
That is really awesome. And are you considered part of the military or do you work with the military? How would you describe that?
So now in my current role, I'm not part of the military. I used to be military. I served for 11 years before I got out, but now I'm a civilian and I'm what we call a defense contractor. And my company has a contract with the United States Space Force to help support their satellite activities at Schriever Space Force Base.
That's pretty cool. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your service and everything that you've
Thank
done.
you.
Okay, so I know because you and I talked a lot on here, and I know the kids are gonna be like, oh, that's a really cool job. What do you think is the coolest part about your job and what you get to do?
So the coolest part of my job is it's gonna sound a little strange, is I get to help people. Um, as a leader, I get to make decisions that impact people's lives in a very positive way. And I also get to work with technology. I get to work with cool satellites and work with people who help operate, maintain, and keep those satellites working at their optimum levels.
That's really awesome. Do you get to see those things in real life, or do you just see them on a screen?
So the answer to the question is both. So I've actually, throughout my career, had the opportunity to see satellites that are now flying in space before they were launched. I've gotten to see the solar panels. I've gotten to see them put into these big tubes that we call vacuum chambers, and see them get tested, get really hot, really cold. I've gotten to see satellites vibrated, what we call vibration testing, where we shake them really, 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 really hard to make sure that the components won't break or fly apart during launch activities when we're getting them to space. Because when we launch a satellite into space, it sits on top of a rocket. And once that rocket is launched, there are a lot of dynamic forces and pressures that act on that satellite that cause it to shake. And if the components can't handle that, the satellite won't work when it gets to space. So, in my day to day job, I'm looking at data on a screen that the satellite is providing us. But in previous jobs, I've had the opportunity to actually go to different facilities and look at things that are now flying miles and miles in the sky around the Earth.
That's really cool. Just knowing what you're doing, like you said, is helping people. And it's almost like a big giant science experiment. Like you're doing all these
Right.
cool tests and science and technology is so important. And that's awesome. You get to do all of that in your job. That's so cool.
Right. Right.
Okay. So you told I actually didn't know that how satellites were launched. So I appreciate you explaining that to us. What would you say is a cool project you worked on or something shocking, a cool story, anything that you want to share with us?
So, throughout my career, I've had the opportunity to do a lot of different cool things. But one cool thing that I had the opportunity to work on was a big satellite for a classified program, which is a program that I can't really talk a lot about because it's a national secret, what it's used for. But I had the opportunity to work on the attitude control systems of that satellite. And that's just a fancy way of saying this is how we point and steer the satellite. And it's also how the satellite knows where it is in space. And those components on this satellite, because it was so big, it was a huge satellite. So think about a school bus, and it was probably the size of a school bus. And this satellite had to have huge things that we call control moment gyros, that are big devices that help point the satellite and tell it where to look. And then we had what we call inertial reference units, also known as IRUs. And basically that tells you where you are in space. And then we have the last component of the attitude control system, um, which is the star tracker. And that star tracker looks at the sky and it tells the IRU where it is based on where the stars in the sky is. So that was super cool and super neat. And then something related to STEM and something super cool that I got to do when I was in college was I got a ride in a fighter jet. I got to ride in an F-16. So super amazing opportunity. It's something that it's hard to explain. It's like it felt like Superman at points. You're flying low, going fast, flying through cornfields. So it was
Wow.
a super cool experience. I've been blessed to have great experiences in STEM throughout my life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's super cool too. Like you have classified projects. So it's so important what you're doing that not everybody can know about it. It's like a big
Correct.
super secret you have
Yes.
to do. And so good job not spilling all the secrets.
Right. Right. Right.
How does a satellite work in space? For a satellite to get up into space and orbit or go around our Earth, a big rocket carries the satellite up into space. Once the satellite is released into space and starts to orbit, it can start doing what it's designed for, sending and receiving signals to and from Earth. Satellites have antennas that act like super strong walkie-talkies. These signals can be used for things like internet, phone calls, and even helping people find their way using GPS. Some satellites have cameras and can take pictures of Earth or other planets. This helps scientists learn more about space and our planet Earth. You might be wondering, how does a satellite stay charged? It doesn't have anywhere to plug in. Satellites get their power from solar panels that are attached to them. The solar panels catch sunlight and turn it into electricity. This electricity powers all the satellite's gadgets and gizmos, kind of like how a battery powers a toy. Satellites are always working so they can do the work they are sent out to do and help us here on Earth. Did you know all these things about satellites? Pretty cool, right? Loving the STEM Career Quest podcast and want more? Join the STEM Career Quest Club. Perfect for teachers, homeschool parents, or families looking to add more educational opportunities during school breaks. Inside, you get access to a private community of other STEM Career Quest listeners, comprehension guides for each episode, teaching slides for each episode where it is broken up into chunks so you can listen in smaller segments, related STEM activities you can complete with simple materials, one monthly virtual STEM field trip, and more. Join the club at stemcareerquestpodcast.com/club. So if you guys are good secret keepers, maybe you guys want to work on classified projects.
Right. And, there are just so many cool things out there in that world that I work in. Um, some of the things that you see on TV, we're exploring those things. And there will come a time where science fiction will be science reality. And you can be a part of that one day if you choose to be.
I love that. All right. So, what experiences in your life led you to your career? How did you get into what you're doing today?
So I'm originally from South Jamaica, Queens, New York City, um, greatest city in the world. Shameless plug. And I was sort of exposed to STEM without knowing I was exposed to it. I grew up in a family that had careers related to STEM. And not only did people in my family have careers related to STEM, I grew up 5 minutes from John F. Kennedy International Airport. And I was always seeing planes. I was always fascinated by it. I remember seeing the shuttle launch and knowing that in some capacity, I wanted to fly, I wanted to be an astronaut, and I wanted to be connected to STEM. And so those people who were in my life that encouraged me and sort of modeled what STEM looked like was my uncle. He was a mechanical engineer and he worked for Newport News Shipyard building subs and aircraft carriers. And then he had a career change and he went back and studied physics, became a physics teacher, worked at Thomas Jefferson Research Lab, working with this physics device called a particle accelerator, which is this huge device that accelerates particles so that we can study and see how particles interact with each other and what happens when we collide them together. And so he was a big influence on my life. And then my dad was an accountant. So not typically what we think of as STEM, but math related. And so he influenced me in a tremendous way. And then my mom was a OBGYN nurse practitioner and she was also a flight attendant. So um all the people that were close to me were involved in STEM in some capacity, whether medical or defense industry or mathematics. So um, at the time, I didn't know it was influencing me. They were just mom, dad, and my uncle. But as I got older, I began to realize, wow, um, they were really doing cool things. And I didn't know how cool the things they were doing were until I got older.
Awesome. And you were telling me a little bit, you thought maybe you wanted to fly airplanes. You might have, were like, maybe I'll be a pilot.
So, my lifelong childhood dream was to fly, and so, in 2016, the summer 2016, I got out of at the time was the Air Force. Now, what I did in the Air Force would be considered the Space Force, and I decided to go back and fly planes. I still had a passion for it. I still wanted to do it. So I started working on my private pilot's license. And I am a private pilot. I haven't flown in a while, but it's still something that's important to me. It's still something that I have a passion for. And so for all you young folks out there that think because it doesn't happen when you want it to happen,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that it can't happen. I wanted to fly in the military. Unfortunately, that didn't work out for me, but I still had the opportunity to fly planes. And like I said, I also had an opportunity to get a ride in a fighter jet. So even though I didn't end up doing that as my military career, I still had opportunities to pursue it in the civilian world. And I also had an opportunity to get a ride in a fighter jet, which is not something a lot of people get to do. So, super cool, super fun.
That is so amazing. I love that. And you can be multi-passionate. You can like a lot of things and it doesn't have to be your main job. You can just still explore what you really love in a lot of different ways. Like I have a worm compost. That's not my real job, but it's very fun.
Right, right.
So along with that, what advice do you have for kids who want to do similar to what you're doing in your career?
So, my first piece of advice is never give up. You're going to have failures in life. That's okay. Failing is not problematic. Not recovering from failure is. So, what I mean by that is don't let anything or anyone keep you down. You can do anything you want to do. It doesn't mean that it will be easy. STEM can be hard at times, but it is worth the work and the effort. And there are people like me out here. We want to help. So if you ever have questions, you have people like Naomi and me and other STEM professionals who want to help you. We're willing to answer your question. We're willing to talk to you about where to go to school, what should I study. Um, and it's not just helping you get into school, it's helping you get through school. And then it's helping you navigate this career called STEM.
hmm That is excellent, excellent advice for anything you guys do. That is so good for all of you to hear. Well, thank you so much, Joseph, for sharing all your experiences, the things that were not classified. And we appreciate having you here on this podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. And, you know, to all those young people out there that are interested in STEM, don't give up on your dreams. Don't let anybody or anything discourage you. And for every person that tells you no, there are millions of other people who want to tell you yes. And I'm one of those people who want to tell you yes. So if you ever have questions, you can always reach out to me.
Hope you've been listening carefully to today's episode. We are now going to reveal the answers to today's episode quest. Question number 1 was, which branch of the U.S. military is Joseph and his team working with? Joseph and his team are working with the U.S. Space Force. This is a newer branch of the military that I think you would all find very interesting. Let me know if this is an episode that you would want to hear more about. Question number 2 was, how do satellites get up into space? They are launched up into space with a rocket. We have talked a lot about satellites back in episode 6, so if you really like this topic, make sure and go check out that episode. And question number 3 was, true or false? Based on Joseph's experience, he thinks that a lot of things that we see in science fiction will one day become science reality. True. There are a lot of classified or secret projects that Joseph can't tell us about here on this podcast, but based on what he has seen and has worked on, there is a lot of technology and projects that you wouldn't even believe are being tested and worked on right now. One day we will get to see it, and those things, like I said, were fiction, will maybe be reality. Want to get more out of these episodes and bring them to life? Inside the STEM Career Quest Club, there is actually a STEM activity that goes along with each episode. So you don't have to leave it here and do just some listening and learning. You can actually create and build really cool things that go along with each episode. Can't wait to see you inside of the STEM Career Quest Club, and you can become an ultimate questie. Loving the STEM Career Quest podcast? Want to be featured on the show? Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and tell us what you love about it. Maybe you'll be featured on our next episode. What is something new that you learned today about being a systems engineer manager? Is this a type of STEM career you want to explore more? Even if it isn't, it's always great to learn new things from new people and discover more about the world around us. So excited for you to continue your journey with me here on the next episode of the STEM Career Quest. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the STEM Career Quest podcast. Grab your free episode badge, connect with today's guest, follow us on social media, join the club, and more. Find it all on our website at STEMCareerQuestPodcast.com.